And there you have it. The best, most consistent season of Star Wars television we've ever gotten. This is a season of Star Wars I never thought I'd get, but I always wanted. Something that's meticulous, galaxy-spanning, focused, and in the end, hopeful. The season finale of Andor does so many things right, and there's so many ways I could start this, but I do want to start by highlighting what the show has been about this whole time. The everyday person rising up. And that's no more true than with the people on Ferrix. All of these side characters who we've been introduced to from the first couple episodes and who have made small appearances throughout and in these last couple episodes really got their moments to shine here. These characters could have been throwaways, they could have been window dressing for the overall conflict, but instead, each one had their own goals, motivations, and arcs throughout this episode. And it really drives home the point that Andor has always succeeded in doing. That every detail, every decision, and every character mattered. The shopkeeper, who was tortured, leads to his son making a makeshift bomb that eventually goes off and starts the biggest act of resistance on Ferrix. Andor's friend, who he was trying to buy tickets off in the first episode to get off of Ferrix, he goes through a transformation and dies fighting a stormtrooper. Even the bell ringer, who was in the trailers and who was this symbol for the town to start and stop their workday, he gets a moment where he kills a stormtrooper, and he continues to beat the drum of resistance throughout the whole battle. Even the man who Andor never pays back in the first couple episodes comes around here, and he tries to make a quick buck off of giving the Imperials a tip on where Andor might be. And you can't exactly blame him. Andor was the one who did him wrong in the first place, and a society built around fear and fascism, and when these communities continue to get more and more oppressed, these people become more desperate to make a quick buck. So you can't really blame him here. And finally, the shipyard owner, who helps Andor sneak around the town and eventually helps to get everyone off the planet, he has a part to play here. While we know that everyone in the series, for the most part, is the everyday person in the Star Wars galaxy, and they have the choice to rise up against the Empire, it was really special to see this much smaller community on a much smaller scale that we know is connected. I really love the moment where Andor is sneaking through the back kitchen and the chef and him lock eyes and they both know each other by a first name basis. It really just drives home the point that everyone in this community is connected. They know each other. And that was such a big highlight for me in this episode. And Ferrix has become just its own piece of the Star Wars galaxy. It wasn't just another backwater town. It had history. It had lived-in communities. It had these relationships and bonds, and that's no more true with the whole funeral procession going throughout the entire town and everyone showing up to listen to Maarva's speech, which I will get into later. I just wanted to do that quick little intro about the people of Ferrix because that's really what the show has always been about, and I'm glad that it started and ended with those people. It was a perfect full circle ending to this impeccable season of television, and there's a lot I want to get into, from Cassian really taking the reins as the main character of this series. I really want to talk about that transition here in this episode that I felt when he was on screen. His presence demanded your attention, and he finally filled that role of the main character that before we knew he was the main character because the title said so. But this episode, I really felt it. I, of course, want to talk about two more amazing monologues added to the Star Wars canon in Maarva's speech and Nemiks manifesto's recording that we heard. I, of course, want to talk about the score and how all of those motifs that we've heard throughout this season for different characters and different moments come together in all these crucial scenes in this episode, and we even get a couple new pieces that I'm excited to hear when the Volume 3 soundtrack comes out. I do want to talk about Mon Mothma and how her story kind of ties up. You guys know how much I've been loving Mon Mothma before, during, and now after the season has finally ended. So this is a bittersweet episode because I've really enjoyed doing these deep dives into these episodes. They've given me a lot to chew on these past couple weeks since the premiere episodes till now. I've really enjoyed this journey with Andor. I can't wait to do it again for season 2 when it does eventually come out. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. So I'll jump right in with Cassian really taking the mantle of being the main character of the show. I know there was a lot of criticism with the show's title. It wasn't very evocative because Andor wasn't that mainstay character in Star Wars canon that wouldn't really attract many casual fans or non-Star Wars fans. But this episode really proves that this was the right title for the show. Right from the start, seeing Andor on Ferrix again, you feel there's a different weight to him. You know everyone in town is looking for him, whether that's in a good way or a bad way, but he's always been the fulcrum, not to make that joke, but he's always been the fulcrum of the show. But here, we see every piece of him throughout his journey. We see him reminisce on a memory with his father about how these old parts are kind of discarded without ever looking down at them, realizing that if you just cleaned them, they'd work just as new, but they'd rather sell you something new. They'd rather sell you a new part than to look down and look past the rust and see the value in something that people usually just walk over. And I think that's something that's stuck with Cassian in the back of his mind. And I think it did have a effect on him in this episode, realizing that he's done a lot wrong in his life, but he's realizing the good he can do as well. He's rough on the edges, but he can be refined into something that can really do some good and really help people across the galaxy. So I like that little moment. And during the moment, they play the past and present suite, which ended the 3-part premiere episodes. Really beautiful score, but it really has become Cassian's kind of theme and motif. So it's nice to see during a flashback it used past and present, how it's affecting each other at all times. Really enjoyed the score use here. This scene also invoked a moment with Nemik where he says, "A surprise from above is never as shocking as one from below." The Empire never looks down. They overlook these scrap piles of valuable parts. They overlook the people of the galaxy. And when the people rise up, the Empire doesn't even realize it's happening. They don't realize how valuable those pieces are when you put them together. And another reason I chose to talk about Nemik right there is because it gives me a perfect opportunity to transition into his fantastic monologue where Andor's listening on this cold, rainy night, and they do this voiceover with all these excellent shots of Bix and Luthen. They do it a little later with Maarva and her speech. I really enjoy these voiceover moments. It adds to that epicness of the series, but Nemik, as always, is dropping truth bombs all over this speech. I could quote the whole thing, but I'm not going to. I'm going to pick out, some of my favorite parts, but this idea that freedom is a pure idea. Tyranny and control are unnatural. They take constant effort to make sure that everyone's falling in line, that everyone's following the rules. And that's what makes it brittle, like he says. Small cracks can form everywhere, and you're always trying to patch these holes before, as he says, the levee eventually breaks. The line about oppression being the mask of fear is something that rings so true throughout history when you think about the Nazi Party and how they used fear around the Jewish faith and the Jewish race to instill other people to get on board with their propaganda and their ideology. Even in America with Jim Crow laws and segregating black and white people and making African Americans out to be these monsters or these things to be afraid of. Oppression is always just in fear of something they don't understand, they don't know, and stuff they want to control. But as Nemiks says, control is unnatural. Even in your own life, you always try to control things out of fear because you don't want things to go wrong. You try and micromanage everything, and that just makes the cycle so much worse. It's a reinforcing feedback loop. And you can see that throughout this season. All of these people in power are so fearful to lose it, and they fall back on oppression to hopefully save themselves in their position of power. And the speech ends with something that's near and dear to me because this podcast started because of the quote from Yoda saying, "Do or do not, there is no try." And Nemik has a different philosophy, one that's the same as Yoda at the end, doing good for the galaxy, but he just says to try. He knows how hard it is. He knows how gargantuan the odds look in the face of the Empire, this superpower. But he just encourages them to just try. Any small act of insurrection moves our lines forward. And I really love this flip on a classic Star Wars quote, because neither disproves the other. One is more empathetic, one is more motivational, but they're both aiming towards that same goal of doing right for the galaxy. And I really appreciated how this speech wrapped up. I love the music that accompanies it and these shots of Cassian looking out, and you can see these words are affecting him. Very dramatic, very epic, and just as good as any Star Wars battle you can put on the screen. Another big moment for Cassian in this episode is when him and Brasso talk in the sewers about Maarva's last words to him. This moment choked me up, which is so impressive because we only got little pieces of Cassian and Maarva's relationship, but they were so powerful that these words didn't just resonate with Cassian, but they resonated with me and probably a lot of the audience. She compares him to a spark, which is nice, spark of the rebellion, but when she says he knows everything he needs to know and he feels everything he needs to feel, and when those two come together, he will be an unstoppable force for good. It's exactly what a mother would say. I can almost hear my mom saying it to me. It's so genuine and realistic that it got to me. And Brasso's delivery of this final line was just the icing on the cake when he says, "Tell him I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong." And that's exactly what Cassian needed to hear. Cassian knows he's a screw-up. He knows he's not a good person. But getting that validation from his mother when he thought he messed up the last time he saw her and that this is somehow his fault, those words do so much for him, and you can see that through Diego's performance. This moment was exactly what it needed to be. And I don't want to jump to the end because look at that. I created another perfect transition where I mentioned Maarva, and now I can jump right into her speech, which was another fantastic part of this episode. And the voiceover shots here added so much to all of the supporting characters listening, not only the people of Ferrix, but Luthen as well. You guys know I've mentioned that Attack on Titan is one of my favorite shows ever. And one of the huge themes in that show is giving purpose or giving meaning to the lives of the dead. And I really got that in this speech from Maarva, where she said, "The dead lifted me with their truth," and that she hopes to impart that upon the people listening to her now. And her truth is that the people of Ferrix need to rise up against the Empire, now more than ever. Again, you can feel the sense of unity here between the people of Ferrix. She mentions how they've always had each other's back. Whether it was the Republic or the Empire, they always did their job. We always kept their engines running. But at the end of the day, all we had was each other. And that's who we need to rely on. And there's two lines in her speech that I really want to highlight that are huge full circle moments for the show itself. She says, "The Empire is a disease, and it's never more alive than when we are asleep." And we've been asleep. I've been asleep. They've been lulled into not caring. It's very similar to Luthen's philosophy from previous episodes. They've had their hands around our throats for so long, we're starting to forget it's there. At this moment, you can see in Stellan's performance, Luthen smiles. Luthen sees that Andor was raised by someone that's in the same boat as him. And that's the moment where he decides, I don't have to kill Cassian. He's more worth it to be alive and fighting this fight with me than to be my enemy or to be a liability. The other piece of this is that she refers to the Empire as a disease. And if you remember in the first ISB meeting, Major Partagaz says that the ISB is healthcare. They cure disease, they identify germs, and they eliminate them before they're allowed to fester. Hearing this flipped here, saying that the Empire is the true disease, was really satisfying to hear. And again, just drawing on Andor's great ability to have these full circle moments of perspective and character. Of course, at the end of this speech, we get some of the most difficult Star Wars to watch because it's so dark in its realism. Soldiers firing indiscriminately at civilians. It's some really deep and heavy stuff, but I think that's why it drives home the point so well that the Empire is this terrible, terrible force, unlike we've ever seen the Empire portrayed before. The music playing during this atrocity is really what I want to highlight because it beautifully intertwines the Maarva's Rebellion score and the Climb score. So Maarva's Rebellion score is her motif, and the Climb score is most associated with Nemik telling Andor to climb after he's already been paralyzed. So while the score titled Climb is more for the over-the-top nature of the scene, it is a very cool choice to have that because it is so closely associated with Nemik. So when you combine these two scores, these two symbols of rebellion for us, the audience, throughout this season, and frankly in this episode with both of their speeches talking about rising up against the Empire, it just elevates the scene to a whole new level that, of course, I really appreciate as a score lover, but I hope everyone else can appreciate. And I can't wait till Volume 3 comes out so I can listen to this Maarva's Rebellion Climb suite. While I'm on the topic of score, I really just want to talk about the funeral procession and how the first song is very somber and the drum beat is almost like the heartbeat. It's very steady as everyone's walking. And then it kicks up the tempo about halfway through as they start to march directly towards the Empire's line. And while it's a small thing and you probably just instinctively get it, I did want to call it out because I enjoyed how that builds the tension, because it starts as a heartbeat for you, just, tension's building, heartbeat, heartbeat, heartbeat. But then when the tempo jumps up, so does your heartbeat as things are starting to happen and the train crash that's about to happen on screen. So wanted to highlight that as well. Also seeing B being part of the procession and kind of rolling between people, that was so sad to see. I do have to mention Deidre and Cyril in this episode. Definitely going to be a power duo in the next season, working with each other. I think Deidre finally sees Cyril as an asset and sees that obsession in him, as I've mentioned in other episodes, that fascists love to be obsessed over. So now we really see that dedication where he basically saves her from being torn apart, like we were watching a historical documentary of the French Revolution or whatever, of tearing down the bureaucracy. That was really, really cool. And a small scene in this episode really highlighted again that Deidre is a strategist at heart compared to the rest of the Empire. We hear about Krieger and how Spellhouse went exactly as the Empire expected. Everyone died, even Krieger. And Deidre's like, we needed somebody alive. We needed to get intel from them. And Partagaz, who we see as this really smart major general, say, we had to wash the taste of Aldhani from the Emperor's mouth. Not forward thinking at all. Perception mattered more than strategy. And I think, again, that just highlights the overall incompetency of the Empire and how content they are and how secure they think they are because of their power. And I wanted to save the last couple scenes till the end. I didn't want to start talking about the end while I was talking about Andor, but we see the hero, Andor, saving all of his friends and getting them on the ship and getting them out of there and having this really nice moment with B where B's like, Cassian, you're back. I didn't get to see you. And he's like, B, take care of them. And he's like, you always say that. And he's like, because you always come through for me. And that was just a really sweet moment that I enjoyed. And again, Cassian felt like the hero finally in this story that I really appreciated. And he goes to Luthen and he's like, kill me or take me in, because he's realized he saved everyone that he needed to save. He's lost everyone that meant the most to him in his mother and father. This life really isn't worth it if I'm not fighting for the cause. And Luthen gives him a nice big smile, a real smile. He's done a lot of fake smiles throughout this season, but this was one of the first real ones. And it was the perfect ending. It was exactly what it needed to be. And I think it's very fitting that I end my analysis videos for season 1 talking about Mon Mothma, because her arc ends with victory. It's bittersweet, but it is victory. She gets away with everything. The rebellion has started. It has support. Her money is getting funneled. The Empire now thinks the gambling debts are why there's funds missing, which she set up with her driver by basically staging that conversation and lying about, oh, where did you get that money? And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, that's what I'm worried about. But she lost everything in the process of this season to achieve that victory. Her daughter is now being married off in an arranged marriage that she's been trying to get away from her whole life. And she's isolated. She doesn't have anyone. I appreciate a story arc that basically says the character won, but at what cost? So shout out to Mon Mothma. Shout out to Genevieve O'Reilly. The Emmy is coming. At least the nomination is coming. And bravo, because even though she had a very small part in this episode, she killed it as always. So thank you, Mon Mothma, for living up to the hype this season. I so appreciate you. I won't stop simping until season 2. I promise. So the end credit scene. I wasn't exactly incorrect with my theory in my episode about the Andor trailer, where we see that there's a mining operation. We see that the Empire is building big starships, specifically a Death Star, and maybe that mining operation that Cassian as a kid is looking over is extracting metal that will be used to build the Death Star. So essentially, the thing that ruined his childhood home and drove him away from his childhood home would eventually be the symbol of the Empire that he destroys and ultimately destroys him. What we got was that the parts that he was building in the prison were for the Death Star, which eventually becomes the symbol that he wants to destroy of the Empire and ends up destroying him in the process. So, I'll take a little bit of credit of not being so far off base, but I do like what they did here. I think we all expected those parts to come back around in some shape or form. because they were just so like random that we were like, okay, I get the point of this prison is not the parts, but the prison escape, learning about these characters. I get it, but what the hell are these parts? Because they were just so oddly shaped. It's interesting. So it was cool to see those come back around, and bittersweet that, yeah, Andor basically helped build the laser, specifically the laser part of the Death Star. So cool end credit scene. I think it was tasteful. It wasn't some ridiculous end credit scene, really long or a silly gag. I didn't expect it to be, but very tasteful, very good, exactly what any end credit scene should be. And yeah, I liked it. And that concludes all of my thoughts for the Andor finale. I think I will be doing a overall season 1 episode, but I don't think it'll just be a rehash of all the things now that we know the entire season as a whole, but more along the lines of how this show rekindled my faith in Star Wars, and in some ways saved this podcast. And I don't say that lightly, but truly this show not only reinvigorated my faith in what Star Wars can be in the TV forum, but also it gave me the opportunity to really dive into and analyze these episodes, because recent TV shows, I've either not felt the motivation to talk about an episode because there wasn't much to talk about other than just repeating what the episode was and maybe some Easter eggs, which you guys know Easter eggs don't really get me going. I don't really care much for them. But this show was something I could really sink my teeth into, talk about themes, score, everything was so meticulous. And I'm not even the best analyzer of stuff. I really enjoy doing it, and I enjoy analyzing themes the most of Star Wars because I feel like I really understand them. And there's been so many great video essays out there about Andor that you should definitely check out. They do a much better job than me, but I've had fun doing my little slice of analyzing things that stuck out to me and studying characters that I really cared about, like Mon Mothma, and really honing my skills in that realm. So this has just been like an overall fantastic experience, not just in Star Wars, but a learning experience from me, because I really enjoy the whole idea of video essays and theses about different themes and character study. So I'm kind of rambling here, but I've enjoyed this so much, and I can't wait to do it for season 2. And I can't even say I'm like dying for season 2, because season 1 was so satisfying, and I'm full. Like, it was filling. Like, I didn't feel like I was gypped of any content. I had so much to think about, talk about, and I have so much more to think about and talk about as these weeks go on and I reflect on this. But they can take all the time they want with season 2. I don't need it this year, next year, 2 years. Whenever it's ready, I'll be waiting. Season 2, I think, is going to be a very different type of television show. I know they said it was going to be a year jump, but this slow burn style, I don't think is going to continue, not because it didn't work, it was fantastic, but I think now that all the characters have been established and you know their motivations, what they've been through, we know there's going to be a time jump. So I think the next piece will be really diving into the game between the Empire and now probably the much more refined rebellion at the point that we pick it up at. And the season has to end with the beginning of Rogue One. So we know it's going to be a big time span over the next 12 episodes compared to this one, which was over just a couple days. So season 2, I expect bigger, more explosive, but the same level of writing and consistency will for sure be there. I cannot thank the writers and Tony Gilroy enough for what they've done with this. As I've mentioned, all Star Wars shows are made with love. That I have no doubt of. But not all Star Wars shows were made with this level of meticulous thought and planning and effort. And all Star Wars shows should strive to do this. I don't want to take anything away from Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, Bad Batch. If you enjoy those shows, good. I enjoyed them too, to a degree. But they could have been better. They could have been much better if they were made with this level of detail as Andor. They would be fantastic. They probably would be better than Andor just because of the fact that we have those emotional connections with characters like Obi-Wan and Anakin. So my hope is that Andor changes the game for Disney Plus and Star Wars. I hope Andor completely shifts Star Wars out of this backwards-facing franchise where we're reliant on Easter eggs and character cameos and really diving into what makes this galaxy special and really building out that context around these characters, planets, and worlds and conflicts. So I'm hoping this was the turning point for Star Wars TV. I'm excited for what's coming, but Andor Season 1 was something special, something I think we'll be talking about forever. I think now that Season 1 is completed, a lot of reviewers are going to review the entire season. All of their audiences are going to see that this show is the real deal. This show is not just another Star Wars show. This is a great piece of television, period. And that's all I've ever hoped for with a Star Wars show. So thank you as always for listening. If you want to see more content like this, follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all the support throughout this season. The reels have been doing great. One of them has 12,000 views on them. Andor is pushing up my cred on Instagram. I absolutely love it. So appreciate Andor for that as well. But anyways, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.